Let's say your town gets promised an economic miracle. I mean, a truly once-in-a-generation project that's supposed to bring back thousands of jobs, just completely revitalize the whole region. Well, that's exactly the promise that was made in Pennsylvania for a massive new petrochemical plant. But what happens when you start digging into the numbers and they don't seem to tell the whole story?
And to really get a sense of just how big this promise was, you just have to listen to this quote from the governor at the time, Tom Corbett. He wasn't just talking about a new factory, no. This was pitched as the second coming of the steel industry for that part of the country. The vision was just immense. A brand new industrial age with prosperity for, generations to come.
And to make that dream happen, the public made a colossal investment. This is what Pennsylvania offered the company, Shell, to build this plant. A 25-year tax credit package worth $1.65 billion. That's billion with a B. It was one of the biggest subsidy deals in the state's entire history. So you can see, the stakes were just sky high.
So you have to ask, right? When that much of your money is on the line, where did the numbers that justified this whole deal even come from? Were they based on a complete and honest picture? And maybe more importantly, what crucial details might have been left out of the conversation?
Okay, so to crack this case, we've got to start with the absolute basics. The plant is called an ethane cracker. Now, I know it sounds super technical, but to really understand the economics here, we have to figure out what that name actually means.
All right, so here's the rundown. First, ethane, which comes from natural gas, gets piped in. Then it gets superheated. That's the cracking part. And that process creates a gas called ethylene. After that, through something called polymerization, those gas molecules get chained together. And this, right here, is the most crucial part. The final product, the thing they actually sell, isn't the gas. It's millions and millions of tiny plastic pellets. Remember that detail, because it's going to be incredibly important in a minute.
So where did all these amazing economic predictions come from? Well, they came from a detailed report written up by some university researchers. But here's the catch. That report was sponsored by Shell. Yep, the exact same company that was about to get that billion-dollar tax break. This one document pretty much became the entire foundation for how the public understood the benefits of this deal.
And that brings us to the first major problem that our source material found in that report. It's something that seems really small at first, but it's a critical error. They mislabeled the product, and that little mistake has massive consequences for all the numbers. So here's the mix-up. The economic report analyzed the plan's impact as if it were a petroleum refinery. But like we just saw, that's not what it does. Its real business is making plastic resin. It's a plastic resin manufacturing facility. I know it seems like a tiny difference on paper, but in the world of economic modeling, these are two totally different industries.
Right about now, you might be thinking, okay, refinery, plastics plant, who cares? It's just words, right? What's the big deal? Well, it turns out that label is absolutely everything. It's the key that unlocks all the other calculations for jobs, for income, for the total economic benefit, the whole shebang. To make this super clear, think about it like this. It's like you're analyzing a factory that makes canned spaghetti, but in your report, you call it a tomato farm. Yeah, sure, the factory uses tomatoes for the sauce, but that's just one ingredient. The actual business is canning spaghetti. It's the same thing here. This plant uses ethylene as an ingredient, but its business is making and selling plastic pellets. And here is why that little difference is actually the billion-dollar question. According to national economic data, the petroleum refinery industry generates, get this, 3.4 times more economic output per worker than plastic resin manufacturing. So by using the wrong label from the start, every single promised benefit, every job, every tax dollar was potentially blown way out of proportion. But inflating all the good stuff was only half the problem. The other issue, and you could argue it's even bigger, was what the report completely left out: the costs. I mean, any real economic analysis has to look at both sides of the coin, right? But this one basically just presented a picture that was all sunshine and rainbows.
To get our heads around these hidden costs, we need a really simple economic idea: the negative externality. It's just a fancy term for when a business creates a cost, like, say, pollution, that it doesn't actually pay for. Instead, we, the public, end up paying the price through things like a damaged environment or impacts on our health.
And trust me, these costs are not some abstract theory. Just look at the plant's permitted annual emissions. We're talking over 500 tons of volatile organic compounds, more than 1,000 tons of carbon monoxide, and a truly staggering 2.2 million tons of CO2 equivalents. And that's every single year. These are very real costs to public health and the environment that were just nowhere to be found in that economic benefit report.
So, after digging into how the numbers were crunched and what got left out, what's the big takeaway here? What does this one story from Pennsylvania mean for the rest of us? Especially when some massive publicly funded project gets proposed in our own backyards.
Well, this case basically gives us a playbook of critical questions we should all be asking. First off, question the assumptions. How are they even categorizing the project? Second, demand the whole story. Don't just settle for the benefits. Ask to see a full accounting of the costs. Third, we should expect our public officials to do their own homework, not just rubber stamp a study that the industry paid for. And finally, maybe the simplest and most powerful question of all, who paid for this report? Which really leaves us with this final crucial question. In this situation, it seems like public officials just accepted an industry-funded report without much independent digging. So when billions of our tax dollars are on the line, who is ultimately responsible for asking the tough questions and protecting the public's interests before the deal is signed? That's something we all really need to think about.